In the distant future, humanity had spread across the stars, forming a vast and diverse galactic empire. Earth, long considered the birthplace of humankind, had become a symbol of strength and unity. Yet, as humans ventured farther into the cosmos, they encountered a deadly force, an alien species known as the Zorth. The Zorth were a merciless, war-hungry race bent on conquering and exterminating any civilizations that stood in their way. The Zorth's fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, massive warships bristling with advanced weapons technology and a relentless thirst for domination. Their ships could travel at faster-than-light speeds, making them nearly impossible to predict or intercept. But the worst part was the Zorth's unwavering ideology. They believed that only the strongest species had the right to exist, and they saw humanity as weak and ripe for annihilation. The first warning came when a Zorth scout ship breached the outer defenses of Earth's solar system, skimming the edge of the orbit of Neptune. It was a mere prelude to the horrors to come. Within weeks, the Zorth unleashed a full-scale invasion on Earth, launching surprise attacks on major cities and military installations across the globe. The humans, who had once been united under the banner of exploration and expansion, now found themselves fighting for their very survival. Earth's military forces scrambled to respond, but they were unprepared for the sheer ferocity of the Zorth assault. The Zorth didn't just attack, they systematically wiped out entire human colonies, reducing cities to rubble and leaving nothing but desolation in their wake. The military struggled to defend key locations, and the civilian population was left in chaos, unsure of where to turn or who to trust. At the heart of Earth's defense stood General Marcus Duran, a decorated war hero who had seen his fair share of battles. He was a man of discipline and courage, but even he was shaken by the scale of the invasion. His orders were clear: hold the line, buy time for reinforcements, and protect the people at all costs. But as the days passed and the Zorth advanced deeper into Earth's territories, Marcus began to realize that victory would not come easily. The Zorth were not just attacking, they were studying humanity, learning its strengths and weaknesses, and exploiting every opportunity. General Duran convened a meeting with the top military leaders from around the world. The mood was somber, filled with the weight of the impossible task ahead. The Zorth's technology outclassed humanity's by decades, their warships capable of withstanding human firepower without even a dent. But Duran was not one to surrender easily. He looked around the room, his steely eyes locking with those of his officers, and made a decision. If we're going to win this war, Duran said, his voice calm but firm, we need to outthink them. We need to use their underestimation of humanity to our advantage. The room fell silent as everyone took in his words. The Zorth had dismissed humans as primitive, weak, and ill-equipped for an intergalactic war. They thought they could crush Earth in a matter of weeks. But Duran was certain that humanity had something the Zorth didn't: sheer determination. We've faced impossible odds before, Duran continued. We fought off alien invaders during the first extraterrestrial conflict. We've survived resource shortages, political strife, and civil wars. But the one thing we haven't lost is our spirit. We fight to protect what we love, to defend our way of life. And that's something they won't be able to understand until it's too late. His words struck a chord with the officers around the table. For the first time in days, there was a flicker of hope. Humanity had a chance. But they would have to rally together, across nations, across cultures, and across every branch of their military, to make their stand. Outside the war room, the sounds of chaos raged on. The Zorth's massive ships hung in Earth's orbit, their weapons ready to fire. The human resistance had begun, but the fight was far from over. Earth was on the brink of destruction, but within the hearts of its defenders, a fire burned bright. As the meeting disbanded and the officers went to prepare for the coming battle, General Marcus Duran remained behind, staring out the window at the war-torn sky. He knew that the road ahead would be long, filled with hardship and loss. But he also knew that the Zorth had underestimated humanity. And as long as there was breath in his body, he would fight to the bitter end to prove them wrong. The days following the Zorth's invasion were filled with an unrelenting surge of fear and desperation. Humanity's forces, though initially scattered and uncoordinated, began to reorganize. Earth's major military powers had been decimated in the opening wave, but the world's leaders understood one essential truth: if they were to have any chance at survival, they needed to unite under one banner, regardless of their past differences. General Marcus Duran had taken the first step in rallying humanity's forces together, but now it was time to build a defense that could outsmart and outlast the alien invaders. He called for the creation of the Earth Coalition, a unified front combining military, scientific, and civilian forces from every corner of the planet. The old divisions, East versus West, rich versus poor, had no place in this fight. Humanity's very survival depended on cooperation. One of the first to respond to Duran's call was Dr. Lila Kavanaugh, an astrophysicist renowned for her work on interstellar propulsion systems. She had been studying Zorath technology long before the invasion, and now, her expertise was crucial. She believed that if they could reverse engineer the Zorath's faster-than-light technology, they might be able to fight fire with fire. Duran met with Dr. Kavanaugh in a hidden underground lab, one of the few remaining places on Earth where the Zorath's attacks had not reached. "Can we do it?" he asked, his tone firm but tinged with urgency. "I believe so," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. "The Zorath's technology is far more advanced than ours, but they've made a critical mistake. They rely on a central power source for their ships, a weakness we can exploit. If we can track the energy signature of their fleets, we may be able to develop a system that disables their ships long enough for us to strike back." Duran's eyes narrowed with hope. "That's our edge, then. We'll make their power our power." The next few weeks were a blur of frantic research, military coordination, and preparation. Across the globe, resistance cells sprang into action, led by a mixture of military commanders, former engineers, and civilians who had taken up arms to protect their homes. Humanity's resilience was not just in its military might, but in its ingenuity and adaptability. From high-tech cities to forgotten rural outposts, everyone had a role to play in the coming battle. Among the newly formed resistance groups was Captain Elena Vargas, a young officer who had once been part of Earth's space fleet. Though her ship had been destroyed in the initial attack, her passion for defending Earth burned brighter than ever. She was assigned to lead a squadron of fighters tasked with intercepting Zorath scout ships and buying time for the Coalition to finalize their weaponry. Vargas had never seen such destruction before. Once, she had piloted ships with pride, protecting humanity's interests in space. Now, she found herself navigating through a sky torn apart by Zorath bombardments, the remnants of cities and military strongholds scattered below her. One evening, as her squadron prepared for another raid on the Zorath's supply lines, Vargas received a transmission from General Duran himself. "Captain, we've just finished calibrating the weaponry. We're ready to launch our counterstrike. Your squadron will be the first wave to test the new technology." Vargas tightened her grip on the controls. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. She relayed the orders to her squadron, a group of hardened pilots who had seen their comrades fall time and time again. This mission would be no different, except for the new hope that coursed through their veins. As the squadron ascended into space, the vastness of Earth's orbit stretched out before them. The Zorath warships, with their ominous shapes and glowing weapon systems, hovered just beyond the reach of human firepower. But now, with the new technology, the tide was beginning to shift. Elena's voice crackled over the intercom, filled with determination. "We'll show them what it means to underestimate humanity." The attack began with a precision unlike any seen before. The human fleet, using the new targeting systems developed by Dr. Kavanaugh's team, found their marks with deadly accuracy. Zorath ships, once thought to be invulnerable, started to falter as their shields began to fail. The humans had found a chink in the armor. It was a small victory, only a handful of Zorath ships were destroyed, but it was enough to ignite the spark of resistance across Earth. In the aftermath of the battle, the message was clear: humanity would not be defeated so easily. The war had just begun, and now, the invaders would face an enemy unlike any they had ever known. In the heart of the Coalition's command center, General Duran watched the victory unfold on the screens before him. He knew the coming battles would be brutal, and the cost would be high. But for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope. The defenders of Earth had proven that they could strike back. The Zorath may have thought they were unstoppable, but humanity was just getting started. The victory in the skies above Earth, though small, had sent a powerful message to the Zorath: humanity was far from defeated. What had once seemed an insurmountable force now faced a foe that was willing to fight with every ounce of its being. The initial success was only the beginning. General Durand knew that the war was far from over, but the momentum was starting to shift in humanity's favor. As the Earth Coalition regrouped after their first major strike, the resistance across the globe grew stronger. Nations previously divided by political borders and resource struggles were now working together as a single, united force. The desperate survivors from every corner of the planet were beginning to mobilize in ways that had seemed impossible just weeks earlier. The Coalition's first major breakthrough came with the discovery of a hidden Zorath supply depot located on the dark side of the moon. The Zorath had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt to their technology, and this oversight proved fatal. Using the newly developed power signature tracking system, Dr. Kavanaugh and her team pinpointed the location of the depot, which held crucial materials for the Zoratha's war machine. If humanity could destroy it, they would cripple the Zoratha's ability to sustain their assault. General Durand's plan was simple: send a team of elite soldiers and engineers to the moon's surface to plant explosives on the depot and return before the Zorath could launch a counterattack. But despite its apparent simplicity, the mission was fraught with danger. Zorath patrols frequently scouted the region, and the moon's harsh environment would be unforgiving. The mission fell to Captain Elena Vargas and her Special Operations Squadron, the same group that had executed the successful strike against the Zoratha's scout ships. With the success of their previous mission fueling their resolve, Elena and her squadron accepted the responsibility without hesitation. After weeks of preparation, the squadron launched their mission. The blackened surface of the moon greeted them with a haunting stillness, broken only by the distant hum of their engines as they descended toward the supply depot. In the distance, the faint outline of the Zorath base shimmered against the inky expanse of space. Every second counted, and the team moved quickly, making their way toward the depot on foot, using the cover of moonlit craters and jagged rock formations. The Zorath were relentless. As Elena and her squadron neared the depot, a group of Zorath soldiers emerged from the shadows, their alien forms menacing in the low light. A firefight erupted, and for a moment, Elena felt the crushing weight of their odds. The Zorath were strong, well-armored, and ruthless. But her team was different. Humanity's will to survive was a force that could not be easily broken. "Hold your ground," Elena shouted into her comms, rallying her squadron as they fought back with everything they had. Every soldier, every engineer, every civilian who had picked up a weapon for this fight, was fighting for the same thing: Earth's future. Explosions rang out as the squadron planted their charges, and the moon's surface trembled under the impact. It was a race against time now. With the depot's destruction imminent, the squadron made their retreat, running back toward their transport ships as the sound of Zorath reinforcements grew louder behind them. Just as the Zorath forces closed in, the mission was a success. The depot exploded in a brilliant burst of light, sending debris into the void. But Elena's squadron was not unscathed. Several members were wounded, and their transport was heavily damaged in the ensuing chaos. Yet, against all odds, they managed to return to the safety of Earth's atmosphere, bringing the good news of the mission's success. As the coalition celebrated their victory, General Durand knew that the war was only escalating. Each success, each step forward, came at a cost. Humanity had lost many brave souls in the fight, but the destruction of the Zorath supply depot had struck a devastating blow to their war efforts. It was clear that the Zorath would not allow this to go unanswered. But something had changed. The Zorath had expected humans to break, to cower, to beg for mercy. Instead, they had found a species unyielding in its resolve. The destruction of the depot had thrown the Zorath off balance. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and outthink them, and that was a mistake they would not make again. At the heart of the resistance, General Durand gathered his top officers, including Elena Vargas, Dr. Kavanaugh, and other key figures in the war effort. The message was clear: the war had entered a new phase. Humanity was no longer reacting to the Zoratha's attacks, they were now on the offensive. "We have them on the ropes," Duran said, his voice steady. "But they will come at us harder than ever. We've taken their supply lines, but we've only scratched the surface. We need to go further, we need to hit them where it hurts most." Elena Vargas stood at the front of the group, a fire in her eyes. "Wherever they are, we'll follow. We'll bring the fight to them." The next stage of the war was about to begin. The defenders of Earth were no longer just protecting their planet, they were going on the attack. And with every victory, humanity was proving that the Zorath had made a grave mistake underestimating their will to fight. The tide of war had shifted. Earth, once reeling from the surprise attack of the Zorath, now found itself striking back with a vengeance. The destruction of the Zorath supply depot on the moon had not only crippled their war efforts but also signaled a new chapter in humanity's fight for survival. No longer on the defensive, General Duran and the Earth Coalition were ready to take the battle to the stars. Humanity had no illusions about the scale of what lay ahead. The Zorath had powerful war fleets, and their military strategies were ruthlessly effective. But there was one thing they had failed to anticipate: the sheer adaptability and tenacity of humanity. As the coalition began to mobilize for larger offensive operations, they relied not only on their newly acquired alien technology but on the very human qualities that had allowed them to thrive in the harshest environments: their creativity, their willingness to sacrifice, and their unbreakable will to protect what they loved. The first target in the Earth Coalition's offensive was the Zoratha's massive fleet station located at the edge of the Sol system. The station served as a staging ground for their ships as they prepared for further invasions. General Duran knew that destroying it would give Earth a significant advantage in the fight to reclaim their planet, but the mission would not be easy. The Zorath fleet surrounding the station was formidable, and any attempt to destroy it would likely result in heavy casualties. The mission fell to Captain Elena Vargas once again, along with her elite fighter squadron. This time, they were not simply striking a target, they were going head-to-head with the Zoratha's might. The stakes could not have been higher. As Elena and her squadron approached the station, their sleek starfighters cutting through space, they received a transmission from General Duran himself. "Elena, I don't need to tell you how important this mission is." Duran's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of concern. "If we don't take out that fleet station, they'll have a direct line to Earth's defenses. You've got one shot. No second chances." Elena's hand tightened on the controls. "Understood, General. We'll get the job done." The squadron entered the heart of the Zorath fleet with calculated precision, using the shadows of asteroids and debris fields as cover. The station was a massive structure, an intricate array of ships and platforms arranged around a central hub, bristling with weapons and defensive systems. Surrounding it was a wall of Zorath warships, their intimidating forms glowing with energy. Elena's mind raced as her squadron's strategy took shape. They would need to be quick, hit fast, disable key points on the station, and get out before the Zorath could mount a counterattack. With the Zoratha's advanced AI-controlled targeting systems, the odds were stacked against them. But Elena had faced impossible odds before, and she was prepared to face them again. "All right, squadron, listen up," she barked over the comms, her voice sharp with authority. "We're going in hot. Focus on the station's power grid and weapons platforms, disable them, but don't waste time fighting off every ship. We're here to hit hard and fast, then get out before we're overrun." The squadron shot through the asteroid field, avoiding the Zorath patrols with calculated ease. As they neared the station, the first line of defense came into view: massive ion cannons and laser turrets, designed to vaporize anything that came too close. Elena's squadron opened fire, sending bursts of laser fire toward the cannons, disabling several in quick succession. But the Zorath didn't go down without a fight. The moment the coalition fighters revealed themselves, the Zorath warships responded in force. "Stay tight, stay focused," Elena commanded, as the squadron weaved through firestorms, narrowly dodging blasts from the enemy ships. Elena's ship jolted as a stray ion blast grazed its hull, but she kept her cool, concentrating on the mission. The first wave of Zorith fighters broke off as the Coalition squadron made a direct assault on the station's central power core. With the station's defenses beginning to falter, Elena's squadron made their final push. The mission had become a race against time, each second brought more Zorith warships into the fray. Elena had her sights locked on the power grid when a massive Zorith destroyer barreled toward her, its weapons primed to obliterate her squadron. "Elena, get out of there," one of her pilots screamed over the comms. But Elena had already made her decision. She would finish the job. She dove toward the power core, unleashing everything she had in one final, devastating assault. Her fighter rocked with the force of the explosion as the power core went critical. With the station's core destroyed, a chain reaction rippled through the entire structure. The explosion was catastrophic, sending shockwaves through the fleet. The Zoritha's defensive perimeter faltered, and several of their warships were destroyed in the blast. Elena's squadron barely made it out of the blast radius, and as they broke free from the station's wreckage, they saw the full scale of the destruction. The once dominant Zorith fleet was now in disarray. But the victory came at a cost. Elena's ship had taken significant damage, and several of her pilots had been lost in the battle. Back on Earth, General Duran watched the explosion from the Coalition Command Center. His face was grim, but he allowed himself a moment to reflect on the victory. "We've struck a decisive blow," Duran said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. But this is only the beginning. The Zorith would not simply retreat. They would retaliate. But for now, humanity had sent a message across the stars: Earth would not be a stepping stone for any conqueror. The fight had only just begun, and the defenders of Earth were prepared to take the battle wherever it was needed. The stars were no longer beyond their reach. And the Zorith would soon learn what it truly meant to face the indomitable spirit of humanity. The stars had burned brighter after the destruction of the Zoritha's fleet station, but as humanity's triumph echoed through the void, the costs of the battle weighed heavily on those who survived. The Earth Coalition had dealt a crushing blow to the Zoritha's expansion efforts, but the victory had not come without sacrifice. Elena Vargas and her squadron had barely made it out alive, and the wounds of the war were now etched in the hearts of every soldier and civilian who had taken up arms. Back on Earth, the Coalition gathered in the aftermath of the battle. General Duran, standing tall despite the weight of his responsibility, addressed the growing number of refugees and survivors. He spoke of the losses, but also of the courage that had defined their victory. His words, though filled with conviction, could not mask the somber truth: the Zorith were not going to stop. Humanity had proven it could strike a blow, but now it needed to prepare for a war that would test it to its very core. "We've seen what we can do," Duran said, his voice ringing through the temporary command centers set up around the world. "But we are only beginning to understand the scope of what we're up against. This fight, this war, is not just about Earth anymore. It's about the survival of every human colony in this galaxy." The Coalition had done its best to rally the surviving fleets, the resistance cells, and the civilian leaders to prepare for what was coming next. But despite their newfound confidence, there was no denying the increasing strain on their resources. Earth's cities had been ravaged, and the damage to the planetary infrastructure was almost beyond repair. The scars left by the Zoritha's initial attack were deep and permanent. Dr. Lila Kavanaugh, Earth's foremost expert on alien technology, had worked tirelessly with her team to develop new weapons systems and countermeasures based on their findings. But her face reflected the same weariness that marked the faces of so many others. The technology they had salvaged from the Zorith warships and stations had proven invaluable, but even with these advantages, they had barely kept up with the Zoritha's relentless assault. "We've discovered new ways to fight back, General," Dr. Kavanaugh said, her voice steady but exhausted as she stood before the War Council. "But we can't continue at this pace without more resources, more manpower. Every victory costs us more than we can afford to lose." The cost of this war, both in terms of lives and resources, was becoming unsustainable. For every Zorith warship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. The Coalition's fight was slowly grinding down their own strength. Humanity had always relied on its ability to adapt, but now, the limits of what they could endure were becoming painfully clear. Amidst the growing tension, there was a whisper of an audacious plan, a way to end the war once and for all. A Zorath superweapon, capable of wiping out entire planets, had been rumored to exist. If it was real, it could be the end of everything. But if humanity could find it first and disable it, the war could be brought to an early conclusion. Elena Vargas, still recovering from her injuries after the battle at the Zorath Fleet Station, was once again thrust into the heart of the mission. Along with a team of the best soldiers, engineers, and strategists, she would journey into the heart of Zorath space to find and neutralize the weapon before it could be used against Earth or any other colony. But the mission was dangerous, more so than any they had undertaken before. The Zorath, though reeling from their losses, were regrouping and preparing for a full-scale retaliatory strike. To enter their territory was to risk everything. And yet, the coalition had no choice. If they didn't take the fight to the Zorath now, Earth, and the rest of humanity, might not survive another wave of attack. Elena stood before the team, her eyes hardened by the brutal reality of the war. We've all lost something in this fight, family, friends, homes. But we still have one thing left, the will to fight. The Zorath think we're weak. They think they can wipe us out. Let's show them just how wrong they are. The mission would require a daring assault on a Zorath-occupied planet, known to be a key hub for their most secretive operations. The planet, designated Voras 9, was heavily guarded, its surface littered with automated defense systems and Zorath forces in constant patrol. The plan was to infiltrate the planet's core, where the superweapon was thought to be hidden in an underground facility, and disable it before the Zorath could use it to bring the galaxy to its knees. The preparation was grueling, and the tension among the squadron was palpable. Every soldier knew that this could be their final mission. The loss of a single fighter could mean the death of the entire team, and failure meant the destruction of everything they had fought for. As Elena and her squadron set off on their mission, the magnitude of their task weighed heavily on their shoulders. But as the sleek ships broke through the atmosphere of Voras 9, they were reminded once again of the stakes at hand. Earth had fought tooth and nail to survive, and now, it was time to strike at the heart of the Zorath Empire. The surface of Voras 9 was a barren wasteland, scarred by millennia of industrial exploitation. Massive Zorath war machines patrolled the desolate landscape, their mechanical eyes scanning for any signs of human intrusion. Elena's squadron made their descent with practiced precision, avoiding detection as they landed in a hidden valley surrounded by towering, jagged mountains. "Once we're in, there's no turning back," Elena said, her voice steady despite the anxiety she felt. "We get in, disable the weapon, and get out. Fast." As they made their way into the heart of the Zorath stronghold, the squadron encountered fierce resistance. Zorath warriors, clad in heavy armor and armed with devastating weaponry, were everywhere. The team fought tooth and nail, their weapons blazing, their resolve unshaken. But as they approached the underground facility housing the superweapon, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the Zorath had been waiting for them. Something felt off. She couldn't help but wonder, had they truly underestimated humanity, or had they been playing their own game all along? The underground facility was a labyrinth of cold metal and dark corridors, designed to shield the Zoratha's most dangerous secrets from the prying eyes of enemies, like humanity. Elena Vargas and her squadron crept through the maze, their senses heightened as the weight of their mission pressed down on them. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. The air inside the facility was thick with the smell of machinery and the sharp scent of ozone. The humming of power cores reverberated through the walls, and faint echoes of footsteps and distant voices hinted that the Zorath were aware of their presence. Elena's heart raced as she signaled her squadron to spread out, silently moving deeper into the complex. "They're here," Elena whispered over the comms, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "Eyes open. We need to find that weapon before they realize just how much damage we can do." They moved in silence, their footfalls muffled by the cold concrete floor. Their mission was clear: locate the superweapon and disable it before it could be used against Earth or any other colony. But there was something unsettling about the way the facility was laid out. It felt too quiet, almost as if they were being watched from the shadows. As the squadron rounded a corner, they encountered their first real resistance. A group of Zorath soldiers, heavily armed and dressed in tactical armor, appeared from a side corridor. The confrontation was swift, blazing gunfire, explosions, and the shrieks of dying soldiers filled the air. Elena's team was quick to neutralize the Zorath forces, but the fight was only beginning. They knew the Zorath would not give up their secrets easily. "Elena, we've got a problem," Sergeant Mendez, one of the squadron's best soldiers, called out over the comms. His voice sounded tight, almost frantic. "There's something wrong with the security systems. I think they've been activated, everything's gone dark." "Damn it," Elena muttered, her eyes scanning the darkened halls. "Stay sharp. This isn't just a simple defense, we're walking into something. I can feel it." The further they advanced into the facility, the more they began to realize something wasn't right. The layout of the corridors became erratic, the walls lined with strange, alien markings that were unfamiliar even to Dr. Kavanaugh, who had studied the Zoratha's technology extensively. It was as though the facility itself was shifting around them, the very design of the place warping in ways they couldn't explain. Suddenly, a voice crackled over their comms, an eerie, mechanical tone that sent chills down Elena's spine. "You should not have come," it said, distorted and alien. The voice was cold, calculating. "You cannot stop what is already in motion." Before Elena could respond, the ground beneath them rumbled violently. A nearby wall suddenly exploded outward, sending debris flying through the air. From the smoke and dust emerged a massive Zorath war machine, a towering, armored figure, its body bristling with weapons and a grotesque, alien face twisted into a permanent snarl. It moved with terrifying precision, its energy shields shimmering as it advanced. The squadron fired upon it, but their weapons barely left a scratch on its armored surface. It was clear they were facing something far more dangerous than the typical Zorath soldiers. This was a weapon, one of their experiments, perhaps. Something they had never seen before, even with all the intelligence they had gathered. The war machine moved with a speed and agility that belied its size, crushing everything in its path. "Elena, we need to fall back," Mendez shouted as he and several other squad members were knocked aside by the force of an explosive blast. But Elena stood her ground. The superweapon wasn't far now. It was close, just beyond the next set of blast doors. She couldn't let this be the end. Not when they were so close to ending the war once and for all. "We can't go back. We fight through this," Elena growled. "Keep moving." As the squadron engaged the war machine, Elena pushed forward with a handful of her best soldiers. The Zorath war machine roared in defiance, but they were relentless, darting in and out of cover, taking shots when they could. Their weapons were ineffective against the beast's armor, but their quick thinking kept it at bay long enough for Elena to break through the blast doors and into the heart of the facility. What she found inside was nothing short of catastrophic. The superweapon was real, and it was far more advanced than anyone had feared. A massive, pulsating core sat in the center of the room, surrounded by intricate energy conduits that fed directly into the surrounding systems. It was unlike anything Earth had ever seen, a fusion of technology and dark energy that could annihilate entire planets in a single strike. But there was something else in the room, something even more troubling, a Zorath commander, tall and imposing, standing beside the superweapon with a look of grim determination. Elena recognized him instantly, a figure she had encountered in their early skirmishes, a Zorath leader who had been involved in several key battles. He was the one who had made the chilling transmission to them earlier. "You're too late," the Zorath commander said, his voice cold and implacable. "The weapon is already active. Your world will burn before you can stop it." Before Elena could react, the walls around them began to vibrate as the superweapon hummed to life. The Zorath commander smirked, his hand hovering over the activation controls. "You will see the full extent of our power." Elena knew they didn't have much time. If that weapon was allowed to fire, the entire galaxy could be at risk. It was now or never. "Squadron, on me!" Elena shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "We're taking that thing down." In the final moments, the squadron rallied together, using everything they had, clever tactics, sheer grit, and their remaining ammunition, to disable the Zorath commander's control systems. It was a race against time. The energy pulses from the superweapon grew stronger, faster, threatening to tear the entire facility apart. With a final, desperate push, Elena and her squadron fought their way through, breaking the Zorath commander's grip on the weapon. The core exploded in a dazzling burst of energy, collapsing into a violent cascade of destructive force. But in that moment, as the superweapon was neutralized, Elena realized with growing dread that the war had changed once again. The Zorath had something far more terrifying than weapons, they had plans within plans, and as the battle raged on, they had only just begun to fight back. The true nature of the enemy had finally revealed itself. And it was worse than anything they had imagined. The explosion that detonated from the destroyed superweapon rocked the entire facility. The intense shockwave ripped through the walls, knocking Elena and her squadron off their feet. The superweapon, its energy cores unstable, began to collapse in on itself, sending waves of destruction through the facility's lower levels. The ground beneath their feet quaked, and the air was filled with the screeching wail of alarms. "Move! Now!" Elena shouted as she scrambled to her feet, her body aching from the blast. Her squadron didn't need further instruction. They'd survived hell and back together, and now, they had to escape before the entire Zorath facility came crashing down around them. They sprinted toward the exit, their path lit by the chaotic glow of the collapsing core. As they raced down the corridors, the facility around them seemed to come alive with violent energy, doors slamming shut, the walls groaning with structural damage, and the sound of debris falling from above. But the worst was the rumbling beneath them, signaling the facility's imminent collapse. They reached the surface just as the entire complex exploded in a cataclysmic burst, sending a massive plume of fire and debris into the air. The ground trembled beneath them as they barely made it to their extraction point, their hearts pounding from the adrenaline and terror. The mission had been a success, but only just. They had crippled the Zoratha's superweapon, but at what cost? As the squadron boarded their extraction ship and blasted off into the sky, Elena's mind raced with the consequences of their actions. The Zorath had been thrown into disarray, but they weren't done yet. The war was far from over, and humanity's place in it was more precarious than ever. General Duran's voice crackled through the comms as they entered hyperspace, bringing them back to Earth. "Mission report, Captain. What's your status?" Elena took a deep breath before responding, her voice steady despite the weight of the news she carried. "The superweapon is down, General. But there's something bigger going on here. The Zorath have plans within plans. They were waiting for us, this whole thing felt like a trap. We've only just scratched the surface of what they're capable of." Duran's silence over the comms was deafening. When he spoke again, his tone was grim. "Understood. Prepare for debriefing. I'll need all the intel you've gathered. We can't afford to make mistakes." The return to Earth was bittersweet. The mission had been a victory, but there were too many unanswered questions. Why had the Zorath lured them into this trap? What other weapons and secrets were they hiding in the far reaches of the galaxy? Most chilling of all, who else had they infiltrated within the ranks of humanity's own forces? As the extraction ship made its final approach to Earth's orbit, Elena gazed out the viewport at the planet below. A planet they had fought to protect, and a home they might not be able to hold much longer if the Zorath kept evolving their strategy. Back on Earth, the situation was dire. The Coalition had already begun repairing the damage caused by the Zoratha's initial attack, but the path to recovery would be long and painful. Refugees crowded the cities, and the loss of so many soldiers had left a gaping hole in Earth's defenses. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, humanity's resilience had not faltered. Elena was greeted with the cheers of the surviving members of her squadron as they disembarked, but there was no joy in her heart. Her mind was consumed with the knowledge that the war was far from over. In fact, it felt as though they had entered a new phase, one that was even more dangerous than before. The Zoroth were adapting, learning from every human move. They were no longer the mindless invaders they once were, they were a calculating enemy, one that had begun to understand the strengths and weaknesses of humanity. The last battle had proven that humanity's ingenuity and determination could win the day, but now, Elena feared that it might not be enough. The Earth Coalition was called into an emergency meeting, and as Elena and her team gathered in the war room, they were joined by leaders from every corner of Earth. There was a sense of urgency in the air. The Zoroth had not been broken, they had only been delayed. General Durand stood at the head of the table, his face grim. "We've just been handed a reprieve," he said, his voice hard as stone. "But we cannot afford to rest on our laurels. The Zoroth are regrouping, and we can expect another wave of attacks soon. We need to plan for what's next, what they'll throw at us, and how we can take the fight to them." Dr. Lila Kavanaugh, still exhausted but driven by the need to protect Earth, stepped forward. "We've analyzed the data from the superweapon facility, and there's something we've discovered. It's not just technology we're dealing with here, it's a far-reaching strategy. The Zoroth are preparing something that could turn the tide of this war in their favor. We've seen their tactics evolve, but it's something else." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, her voice sharp. "We believe," Dr. Kavanaugh continued, "that the Zoroth are attempting to awaken an ancient, dormant force, an artificial intelligence, embedded in their warships and facilities across the galaxy. If they succeed, it will give them unprecedented control over every battle, every engagement." Elena's blood ran cold. The implications were terrifying. An AI? They had barely scratched the surface of the Zorotha's technology, and now they were faced with an existential threat far greater than any weapon they had fought before. "We've made it this far," General Durand said, looking at each member of his team. "But the next stage of the war will be unlike anything we've faced before. If we're going to win, we'll need every advantage we can get. We'll need to strike first." The room was silent as the weight of his words settled over them. Earth was no longer just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its very soul. The Zoroth had proven that they would stop at nothing to destroy humanity. And now, the true nature of the war had become clear. The stakes had never been higher. The battle for Earth's future had begun in the stars, and now, humanity would have to venture further into the unknown, facing the greatest threat they had ever encountered. But one thing was certain, the Zoroth might have the technology, but humanity had something even more powerful. The will to fight. The will to survive. And the will to win.